Jon Stewart is back at The Daily Show once a week on Mondays, and didn't take long for him to alienate not the conservatives, but the libs. Now, if you're mad at us for not playing any clips, don't be mad at us, be mad at Comedy Central. They are horrible about copyright, and so we can't play any clips. But this was a write-up from Rolling Stone. Liberals are not laughing about Jon Stewart's jabs at Joe Biden. Now, when we saw Rolling Stone did a write-up on this, we were expecting a nauseating op-ed from one of the types of people who tweeted about the Jon Stewart video. This is actually a fairly straightforward write-up, and they aggregated a bunch of tweets in response. Some of the tweets that they featured are from accounts that I'm actually have actually blocked me, and so it actually came in handy that I was able to read this article. But let's take a look. One-time fans who perhaps remember comedian Jon Stewart only taking satirical swipes at conservatives while host of The Daily Show were shocked and aggrieved when he returned to host the program after almost 9 years on Monday to take aim at President Joe Biden. During an Indecision 2024 segment that anchored the first half of the show, Stewart aired exasperation over Donald Trump and Biden being the oldest ever candidates for president, breaking a record they themselves set in the 2020 election. In his usual self-deprecating style, he also took a moment to lament his own age and appearance. Yes, the monologue made room for ridicule of Trump's most unhinged comments, but did not spare his incumbent Democratic opponent, who has lately faced intense questioning on his mental acuity. At one point, Stewart showed Biden at a press conference to address a Justice Department probe that characterized him as a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory, mixing up the countries of Mexico and Egypt. Stewart's takeaway was that both men were obliged to prove their fitness for office. What's crazy is thinking that we're the ones as voters who must silence concerns and criticisms, he said. It is the candidate's job to assuage concerns, not the voter's job not to mention them. Seems reasonable. He also said that the danger posed by another Trump term doesn't excuse Biden from scrutiny, but actually makes him more subject to scrutiny. To leftists and progressives fed up with Biden, particularly his commitment to Israel as it continues to bomb civilians in Gaza, the assessment was not just fair, it was obvious. But more centrist Democrats, including those most likely to have appended blue wave and resistance labels to their social media accounts in the Trump years, were appalled at what they saw as a betrayal of by one of their own. So let's just take a look at a few things that he's talking about from Chris Jackson. Wow, so you basically say because Biden is old, he is basically as bad as Trump. Why the F do we never learn as a country? Sorry, but I won't be watching you either. This guy. These are all featured in the article. Jon Stewart is 20 years younger than Joe Biden, but they look the same age. I'm just adding that to the discourse. Ooh, burn. Look at this fucking moron with the Israel and Ukraine flag there.
Oh, my God.
This is how you know a take's going to be lousy. President Biden honored Jon Stewart for his work on the PACT Act and at the bill signing ceremony, calling for a standing ovation. The Daily Show, this is how you pay him back? What a cheap shot. I'll never forgive you. No, that's right, because it's your job in the media to never criticize a politician once they talk nice to you. That's the way a healthy democratic society works, is politicians grease the media grease them back. How dare, whoa.
Of course.
Whoa.
Of course.
Hey, he honored you for your work at a ceremony. Now you're going to criticize him? What's that? I'll never forgive you.
How dare he tell the truth?
Yeah, exactly. He was so good to you.
Your lord and master gave you a sword from 17th century Japan, and this is how you repay him?
Yeah, right. This is how you repay him? Aaron Rupar, one of the dumbest people on this site. Jon Stewart still has it in terms of being funny and entertaining, but the political content of this monologue is basically the New York Times op-ed page in TV form. Both sides are not, in fact, equally bad. Oh, it's just hilarious. I mean, we'll get to our responses later. Keith Olbermann. Well, after 9 years away, there's nothing else to say to the both sides-ist fraud Jon Stewart bashing Biden, except please make it another 9 years. We'll keep going. The Palmer Report, they blocked me, so I had to pull this from the article. Sorry, Jon Stewart, but this is both sides' false equivalence horse crap. The Daily Show is supposed to cut through the media dishonesty, not parrot it.
Boy.
Will not be watching. And here's Joyce Carol Oates, who apparently a former client of Russell Dobular. Apparently she rented your theater for a reading of some kind.
Yes, she when we had this theater no longer exists. They turned it into a VIP room. But when I had the Red Room Theater on 4th Street, that was my first theater actually. You never forget your first. So because the bar, it's still a literary bar, the KGB bar downstairs. So we get all these literary figures. So she rented the theater, my theater upstairs. And it was the first time I'd ever really been exposed to the literature crowd as opposed to the theater crowd. And wow, if you think the theater crowd are assholes, you ain't seen nothing until you've dealt with these fucking literary assholes. Because at that time, now it's probably changed now because everyone's afraid of getting canceled. But back then, everyone, particularly the men, were very pumped up on the myth of the crazy alcoholic writer.
Right.
And, most people have no talent.
Right.
So the best they can do is act like they do. So you'd get all these really obnoxious, drunk dudes thinking that's going to make them William Faulkner if they act like a big enough asshole.
Right.
And, okay, so I'm not your usual profile for somebody who'd be running a theater. I'm from Queens. So it was all I could do not to punch some of these people in the fucking mouth, man, because they would do shit where like they're trying to play the wild artist and you're the authority. And
get in your face. Well, Joyce Carol Oates says, if this is Jon Stewart's triumphant return, it sounds surprisingly unoriginal in the vein of what mainstream media has been clamoring for months. Too old, too old, too old. Both sides identical, too old. This is funny or helpful. Exactly how? Okay, so first of all, let me just start at the very, very basic thing. Give just a review of that segment. It was a good segment. That was like vintage Daily Show. That is like, if you were to look up Jon Stewart Daily Show in the dictionary, if you had a virtual dictionary, a video dictionary, that's what you would get. Not a brilliant segment, but a good segment. That's like right at the meat of the bell curve in terms of like Daily Show segments. That was like the average Daily Show segment under the Jon Stewart era. So it's fine.
And I will say before we criticize it, credit where credit is due, he really didn't miss a beat. And a lot of people have said that. It's quite remarkable how much it does. And I think it said that in the Times article, that it almost seems like he stepped away for a weekend. Like he didn't read as rusty. He went
good.
Right back in. He was good. And yes, that's part of why it played as vintage Daily Show, because he just went right back into the same persona, the same delivery, the same rhythm. There was you didn't feel like he was missing a beat.
Yeah, and he was an equal opportunity offender in that. Now, they say that that's both sides and both sides are identical. He wasn't saying both sides are identical.
I don't even think he did that. I don't even think he did that. At all. Like for me, watching that, I was like, yeah, so why don't you talk? So if you're going to list all of Trump's sins, fair enough. Why don't you list Biden's sins? Why don't you talk about the fact that there's an ongoing genocide in Gaza? So even
well, he did mention that at one point in the broadcast. I don't know if that was in the clip that you saw, but he did say something. It was not in the clip
that I saw.
He did say when he did respond to Biden's over-the-top comment. Like, that's what you would say about Israel's response? Just a little, he was joking about it, but he definitely alluded to that. But yeah, I didn't think it was both sides. He made a concern. I mean, this is a concern that most Democrats actually tell pollsters that they share, which is that he's not capable of running.
You need Conan at the gate, right? So that is not. He didn't both sides it.
Right.
He made it that.
Bless you.
Trump is the threat, and Biden's not up to meeting the threat.
Exactly.
He did not frame it as they are equal threats.
Right.
So
exactly.
I mean, that is what fucking snowflakes these people are.
Right.
You can't make the argument that in a democracy, that was the essence of his monologue, that in a democracy, it is incumbent on the politician to persuade the voter. It is not on the voter to bow their head and not challenge the politician. That's too much for you. That's too much fucking truth for you to handle in a monologue that overall was framed on their terms, that Trump is the threat. So we need something that can stop that threat. That it was their framing. He just said, like, yeah, man, the motherfucker's old, and you can't expect people not to ask about that.
Right. That was it. That was
That
it.
was it.
And according to every poll, most Democrats even, feel that way. You know, he pissed off the 30% of Democrats who are just in the tank for whoever the Democratic Party tells them to be in the tank for, absolutely no matter what. Most of those other 70% will fall in line when they're told to. But he offended the real party diehards,
The
and
hacks.
that is the audience that all of this media has cultivated over the past few years, especially since the internet started eating into the TV audience. Now you get the older, more retro, just true, TV news addicts. That's who watched the Daily Show while Jon Stewart was gone, and that's the audience that show catered to, as well as the New York Times. Like, I don't know where Joyce Carol Oates, who took a shot at the New York Times here. I don't know. I forget which one of these idiots said, this reads like a New York Times op-ed. Oh, yeah, this guy. As if the New York Times doesn't cater to the same audience. The New York Times put out an article saying Jon Stewart is back and telling jokes you might not want to hear, meaning you, the reader.
Right.
So it's the same audience. But yeah, that's how coddled these people have become by their media.
93% Democrats, the New York Times readership. 93%. Yep.
Yeah, and that is how just utterly weak they are, that they can't take even that. That was an offense. Oh, I'm not watching anymore. What did you think Jon Stewart was going to do? Like I said, this is what he did all the time. He had that rally to restore sanity. Remember the Stewart Colbert? Right. Like, he's always been an equal opportunity offender, sometimes even to a fault. Sometimes he fence sits too much. But that's what you could expect from him. So I don't know if they just forgot about it, or if they were so used to Trevor Noah, Jordan Klepper going out making fun of the MAGA people. Like, it was all confirmation bias all the time, every single episode for 9 years. Maybe that's why they reacted so badly to this.
I think you're exactly right, because Stewart's successors suck so fucking bad. The people who came out of The Daily Show are such an offense against intelligent comedy. John Oliver, sometimes he'll do a good investigative segment, but he lies and misrepresents facts so much that it's really not worth watching him for what's good, because you don't know if he's telling the truth. Because I've watched him lie. I've watched him misrepresent. He sounds exactly the same way, so how do you know? Unless you happen to know the subject very well. He could be completely bullshitting, which he does quite frequently. His trans segment was fucking absurd. Yes, some people are sterilized, but... Oh, really? That's a minor... It's a minor thing, huh? Some people are sterilized. That's funny. That's funny that some people feel that that's a concerning thing. And Stewart did that shit too in his manner on the same subject. Samantha Bee, whose show is now canceled, rightly so. And, Stephen Colbert, you could definitely argue, led the descent into what, I never saw this phrase, but it works very well, actually, from the Times article, clapter. You could argue that Stephen Colbert really led the train in the Trump era away from laughter and toward clapter, which is a term for a kind of laughter that's not really laughter. It's virtue signaling to laugh at the, yes, Trump can use as a cock holder, It's not. Right. It's not real laughter. It's not funny. Do you really think this shit is funny? It's showing that you're on the team. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think over the last 9 years, people have been conditioned to that. Just awful, awful comedy whose only purpose is like a religious ritual to reinforce a collective belief system.
Right,
So,
exactly. It doesn't matter if it's funny.
right,
The mechanics of the joke telling don't matter. And Stewart is a good joke teller, and he has a lot of skill, and you saw that in the monologue. It was back. Like that reminded you of the years of the Daily Show before he clearly got tired of it. Like toward the end,
right,
there was not much left in the tank. You could tell he would just play a clip of something crazy and then just do like the wide-eyed bird face, and that was the joke. Like this, he actually did add some stuff. I always thought the writing on his show was phenomenal. The editing was phenomenal. The way they would put together these montages of all these obscure clips and
right.
exhibits from years past, and they would get this shit together by 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I mean, the show airs at night. It doesn't tape
Hmm.
at night. It tapes late
Right,
afternoon, early evening.
right,
So
right.
it was just an amazingly done show. And this was not a great segment, but it was solid, middle of the road. It's everything you would expect, and they couldn't handle it.
Yep,
Yeah.
right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Stewart, that's what's really funny because I'm watching this and I think anyone who's on the left would watch that monologue and say, well, it's pretty milquetoast.
Yeah.
Like he's missing a lot of territory there.
Right.
And even that's too much. It just really tells you how far gone these people are. It will be very interesting as this goes on how Stewart reacts. If he accommodates those people, if he shifts to accommodate them, or if he I don't like a lot of what he did on The Problem, but a lot of what he did on The Problem was good. It was kind of a mixed bag. I've said this before. I think he was trying too hard to be down with the kids. For example, his trans segment was a very good example of I would have expected Jon Stewart to apply more critical thinking skills to that kind of thing. I think he very much feels like the old white guy who has to stay relevant by going along with a lot of shit that he hasn't thought through. That aside, I do get a sense of him as a guy who could turn around and say, you know what, I got enough money, fuck these people, I'm going to piss them off.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, even in that era, he did that occasionally. Like he defended Joe Rogan when there was a cancel campaign out against him. Remember Neil Young and them tried to get Spotify to cancel him. He defended him against that. So yeah, I mean, he is he's a guy who has enough original thoughts in his head to the point where sometimes those are going to stray from orthodoxy, and sometimes he lets those thoughts go. And so we'll see. We'll see if he still has a job next week after that. I think he will, because that's as relevant as The Daily Show's been in forever. Notice, he got them talking about it in 9 minutes more than Trevor Noah had in his 9 years, right?
Well,
One 9-minute segment from Jon Stewart got way more conversation than anything Trevor Noah did on that show.
Well, that is something I was thinking when I watched it. Like, yeah, Trevor Noah did Clapter. That's all he did.
Right.
That's all he did. What? Obama is supposed to turn down money? He's supposed to be the first? Well, fuck you. And all the libs go.
Yeah, exactly.
Fucking that was his whole show.
Yeah, it was the whole show. Nobody
For 9
cared.
years, that was all he did.
Yeah, exactly.
Please clap.